Good afternoon. Thank you again for taking some time this afternoon to join me. I'd like to update our situation with the Sunnyside Child Care Center. As you heard yesterday, we had roughly 86 children who presented to hospitals in Alabama, or in Montgomery, on Thursday. Of those, 30 of the 86 were hospitalized. That gives us an attack rate of approximately 27% and about a 35% hospitalization rate. Based on the information we've got today, this is evidence that this is an ongoing investigation. Yesterday we had information that we had one child who remained hospitalized. Today, another number now suggests that we have 2 children who remain hospitalized. And we'll continue to monitor that situation. The main information in today's update is the results of lab tests from yesterday. As we talked yesterday, there really are 2 types of food-associated infections. One of them represents where you've got replicating bacteria, and the consumption of food contaminated by those bacteria cause disease in the individual. An example of that's norovirus, Shigella, Salmonella. The other sort of food-associated illness is where you've got bacteria that grow in the food and they produce a toxin. And it's the toxin that is in the food that causes disease. So we tested, we had 9 clinical samples yesterday. These were from children who had presented who were ill. Yesterday we tested them for norovirus and got results late last evening. None of the 9 were positive for norovirus. Now they have been plated out and are undergoing further tests for enteric organisms, things like Shigella and Salmonella. And I can say that at least as of this morning, there was no evidence that Shigella or Salmonella were growing. So from the children and from the issue of either viral infection or bacterial infection, right now we have no evidence to support either norovirus or Shigella or Salmonella as causes of the outbreak. From the food samples, on the other hand, we had 8 food samples that we tested yesterday. Of those 8 food samples, 4 of those 8 were positive for Staph aureus toxin, and they were negative for Bacillus cereus toxin. There are still 9 more samples that are pending that we'll get results on. Now, let me place a caveat here. The challenge here is that the food samples that we took were the only ones available. They were samples that had already been discarded. So we worry about the length of time they could have remained in the trash can before we got them. You obviously worry about cross-contamination because the food samples that were positive were chicken and noodles at both sites, apples at one site, and green beans at the other site. So it's hard to say from that you've got one food that was contaminated. You also worry about if the food sat in the trash can, could you have gotten bacterial growth just because it sat in the trash can? I think the ongoing investigation is now going to focus on several things. One, obviously we want to continue to follow the issue of children who might remain hospitalized and make sure that they get discharged and do well. Secondly, we want to continue to process samples. We've got, as I said, 9 more food samples that we hope to get results on today or tomorrow. We also want to continue to see what the results of those enteric samples are, make sure we don't have Shigella, make sure we don't have Salmonella. We want to make sure that with the E. coli that we don't have a toxin-producing E. coli associated so that we can rule out bacterial and viral illnesses. Then to confirm the staph as a cause of the illness, it would be very helpful if we're either able to grow staph out of the food or alternatively and preferably be able to identify staph in some of the clinical samples that we're working, and then you'd love to be able to match those two to make sure that they're the same Staph aureus. So we're worried about the patients. We're obviously continuing the biological, microbiological investigation, and then lastly, we're going to implement the ongoing interview of the individual patients to try to narrow it down to a specific food that may have been the culprit. We're continuing to work with Sunnyside in terms of their kitchen. Our environmentalists are working with them in terms to make sure that everything is as it should be in the kitchen. The kitchen is remaining closed while we continue this outbreak investigation. This is an ongoing investigation. Probably the easiest part of the investigation is done, certainly the part that moves the fastest, that is getting the results of the biological samples, getting the results of the enterics and those sorts of things. But let me stop there. So just to summarize, we've got no evidence of norovirus as a cause. At this point, we have no evidence of bacteria, a Shigella or Salmonella, an enteric bacteria as the cause. The early testing points to Staph aureus and a toxin-induced cause. That we want to confirm with additional testing. We're hampered somewhat by the fact that the food had to be recovered from trash cans and had sat out. In addition, we want to get more clinical samples, clinical results on staph, either from the food and or from patients, so that we can try to link those two. And then lastly, we're engaged in ongoing evaluation to try to identify, if we can, the probable cause of the food, and then we'll work backwards to see then if there is something that we can do to prevent this from occurring again. So that's what I've got, and I'll be glad to answer questions.
Could you go into detail a little bit more about what this means, how this toxin is developed?
Yeah, well, 25% of us carry Staph aureus in our nose or on our skin. And the way staph generally occurs is someone gets staph that they have on them onto a food product. And then the food product is not kept cold enough, or alternatively not kept hot enough. Then what happens is the staph replicates, and as it grows, the staph produces a toxin. Then when you eat the food, the toxin, not the staph per se, but the toxin then causes the illness. And the classic illness is what we saw: nausea, vomiting, diarrhea. The other thing that's very suggestive even yesterday was the onset. Staph toxin can cause illness as early as 30 minutes after exposure to maybe 6 hours after exposure. So when you start talking about children having lunch at 11 and then becoming ill somewhere in the 2 o'clock to 3 or 4 o'clock hour, you know, you're looking at a window of 3 to 4 hours after a meal. So that all makes sense. One of the things that makes staph toxin more challenging than some others is it's heat stable. So cooking the food doesn't inactivate the toxin. So that's why it's so important. Hand washing becomes so important. It becomes so important that food that is supposed to be kept cold is kept cold, and food that's supposed to be kept above 140 degrees is kept above 140 degrees. Because you want to impede the multiplication and growth of the staph, because it's in their multiplication and growth that they produce the toxin.
Is the kitchen there inspected by the state?
It is inspected by the state.
Any clue in their health scores? Or?
I haven't even asked about their health scores. Our environmentalists have been in there looking at it. They've got some education they want to do, but we'll look back in and I'll get you the scores.
So for now, basically, you think this is contained to just this one kitchen?
Yeah, this one, well, I think it's contained to, yes, I think it's contained to this one food source. I think it's contained to children who were there. Staph food poisoning is not communicable from person to person, so we don't have to worry about these kids giving this to somebody else. I think this is like so many other foodborne outbreaks that we have. It's an unfortunate event, but in this case, I think it's going to be a self-limited event because you don't have to worry about person-to-person transmission. Our mission is to make sure that if there is a way to prevent this, that we can identify working with Sunnyside, whatever might be appropriate to prevent that.
Any idea on when you'll be finished with this investigation?
You know, I think our hope is obviously sooner rather than later, but my guess is these are the sorts of things that in terms of fully analyzing the data, being able to identify to the best of our ability the food, you're probably talking about, you know, next week sometime. And you know, and what often happens here is you find that, you know, there are some foods you can exclude because nobody who consumed or they simply are either implausible or everybody consumed them, including the people who didn't become ill. And what else you're going to find is that there are a certain number of foods that maybe everybody consumed or were consumed across the board, so they're not helpful. And then you're going to find, okay, this food was consumed by 80% of the people who got sick, and if you're really lucky, you'll find that nobody who didn't get sick consumed it. More likely, you'll find 2 or 3 people did, and then you're left scratching your head. Okay, why didn't they become ill? These things are, you know, they're a lot of detective work, and at the end of the day, it's so nice if you can put your hands on a bacteria from the patient and a bacteria from the food and match them. That's sort of the gold standard. Otherwise, what you're doing is you're using statistical inference to try to prove a case, and you know, and you can. Statistics suggest things; they rarely prove things.
And I guess really, how dangerous is this Staph?
Well, Staph aureus for most people is you know, it is a very unpleasant 24 hours for most people, with the diarrhea, the vomiting, but the overwhelming majority of people recover quickly within 24 to 48 hours, and you know, obviously, could it be life-threatening? Yes, in a very young child who gets dehydrated, or in an elderly adult who gets dehydrated, who doesn't get medical care. In those scenarios, it can be life-threatening, but it's life-threatening not because of the staph, but because they didn't get the necessary medical assistance with hydration. It's all, and for this one, antibiotics don't work. This is about supportive care for the patient with maintaining their hydration.
And these were many young children.
Yeah, so that explains why the reports that we saw yesterday, and then actually from the night before, about having children presenting with lethargy made lots of sense. These were children who were young. They were vomiting, so they couldn't in many cases keep fluids down. They had diarrhea, so they were dehydrating that way. And a clear manifestation of dehydration in young children can be a lack of activity, just lethargy.
And how long will the daycare centers remain closed?
Well, we've asked them to remain closed during the continuance of this investigation. We would certainly hope, and especially during the period while we're working with them on the kitchen to make sure that they're where we want them to be on the kitchen. So I'm hoping this will be, you know, a matter of a few more days. But I don't. At this point, it'd be just my guess.
Can you tell us any of the issues that you saw within the kitchen?
I don't actually have those with me. We talked with the environmentalist this morning. It wasn't so much issues. It was, you know, based on what we have right now, we just want to go back over with them the issues that if this does turn out to be staph and we're able to nail that down, be sure we can go back over with them the factors that are associated with staff food-borne illness, so that we, have done all the intervention we can do. I don't know that we saw an obvious break in appropriate kitchen protocol. Okay. Any other questions? I will get you right now the scores. I think we inspect them, but they're in we may not, and I'll tell you why. They are a non-DHR licensed daycare center, so they're a church-sponsored daycare center. So I'm not sure that they get inspected. Do you know, Mac?
They actually, environmental, I think, has oversight over it and had done something.
Okay.
So I think there should be something.
Okay, we'll get that for you. Anything else? Okay, thank y'all.